Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 39th MBT Fireside Chat. This is the last one we will be recording in 2017. I'm going to start with a question from Ash. Now, this was a second part of a question from the youth Fireside Chat. Now, I know Tom's going to be doing one again that's going to be coming out very soon, but this was something we left over from that to ask today. So I'm going to ask that first, Tom, if I may. Ash writes, in Journeys, Robert Monroe writes that he had a certain type of data stream switch experience, which he refers to as a air hiss or valve, and that these were visions of the future. He gave this equation: H, hissing sound, plus V, valve opening sensation, equals F, future event vision. He gives confirmed examples of the accuracy of these visions, then goes into visions that have not yet been confirmed. On some pages, he describes the visions thus: there is principally a feeling of doom and the breakup of civilization as we know it due to something momentous having taken place, a factor beyond human ability to control. So my question is this: should we not be preparing a plan of action in case of something like this occurring, so that we can then help with a more focused and efficient way of giving our healing and other knowledge?
You'll have to remember that Bob Monroe, like all the rest of us, has to report what he sees in terms of his own personal interpretation, which is based on his own history and his own fears and his own caring and his own whatever, his own experience base. So when he hears this hissing sound and a valve opening sensation, what exactly is a valve opening sensation? That's kind of an odd thing to say. These are metaphors in his own mind for a precursor to a future event vision. So we make these things up because if the vision just occurred, somehow that would be unsettling. We wouldn't be able to tell it from some other kind of thing that we were viewing. So he has this little tool set, if you will, that he has learned to use that gives him a sound and a sensation. And that sound and sensation then tells him that what he's going to get next is some future event. So first of all, we won't take his tool set too seriously as far as it being a literal thing. Rather, it's a figurative thing. It's a metaphor. So that's one. Now, secondly, when he does see this feeling of doom and the breakup of civilization, something momentous having taken place, I've had visions like that too, particularly back in the 70s. But there's a few things to think about here. One, just because you get that information, just because Bob Monroe gets that information, doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. The future hasn't been figured out yet. He may be looking into some sort of future probability that is not very probable, or one that is highly changeable. So you always have to stay skeptical. When you get that sort of information, you just have to be skeptical. You can't say, oh, this is going to happen, we better prepare for it. Excuse me. What you can say is this might happen. And if that's the case, then maybe I should be aware and make sure that I'm kind of looking out for the signs or whatever else would be a precursor to this sort of a big event. Obviously, if it's something momentous, it's not going to sneak up on us and happen, overnight while we sleep and we have no idea. Things momentous don't happen that way. We'll have plenty of time to think about it and plenty of time to realize it's coming and so on if it comes here. So the approach that you should take is consider these sorts of things possibilities. Don't consider them things that are definitely going to happen. And then be aware of things building in your culture and in the world so that you aren't caught surprised. But don't expect these things to happen like it's this is going to be a fact. So the best thing to do is be skeptical. Don't necessarily plan on a bad time happening, but if it does, and you see that it's that's what's going on in the world and that it's coming to a crescendo, then yes, then you should prepare for it. So that's kind of the practical view. Now, in a bigger picture view, yes, of course, using our intent to grow up, to become love, that's going to optimize our ability to deal with whatever happens, good, bad, or indifferent. So, whatever you're planning for, growing up is the thing to do to get yourself ready for it. So that's the way I would say you should kind of deal with these things. I guess there's not a whole lot more to say about it other than remain skeptical. Bob also, in his Far Journeys books, talked about a time, I think it was next millennium, in the 3000 something, that the world was all at peace. Everybody had learned to become love, and it was a wonderful place. So he's had descriptions that are exactly the opposite of that as well. And his descriptions, notice, don't come with any year assigned to them. They're all things that might happen sometime in the future. So don't worry about them. If you worry about them and say, oh no, all of our, life's going to hell in a handbasket and we need to get ready for the end, then you're just adding fear to the problem. You become part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So be skeptical, stay plugged in, and prepare if you feel like that's necessary, but otherwise just live your life, find as much happiness and joy in it as you can, smile a lot, laugh a lot, and don't worry too much about what's going to happen in the future. Whatever happens, you have an opportunity to deal with it when it does happen, and that's what's important, how you deal with it, not so much what happens. So it's interesting to read things like this, but don't take them too seriously. It's not, that's more to the fear side. Oh, awful things are going to happen. We need to prepare for awful things. Well, when you get into that fear mode, you become part of the problem.
Okay, thank you, Tom. What about someone like Nostradamus? That's going off a little bit, but did he tap in? Did he have the similar kind of visions? What's Nostradamus all about there?
Well, now I don't really know what Nostradamus is all about. I know he's written some things down that can be interpreted to have meaning, to today, but a lot of that is interpretation, and who knows how much of that is real. So again, unless you are the person who actually has an old manuscript from Nostradamus and you're reading the original and you know how to interpret it and you know how to interpret all the images, well, if that's not you and you're just reading about it and somebody else's interpretation, don't take it very seriously. It's interesting, perhaps, entertaining, perhaps, but not to be taken very seriously. If those things do happen, then we'll deal with them. If they don't happen, we won't have to deal with them. But worrying about them that they might happen is not only a waste of energy and effort, it puts you in the position of being part of the problem.
Okay, yeah, that's very sound advice. Thank you, Tom. Okay, as normal, we give preference for questions to those people who have joined us this afternoon. We're going to come to Vanessa in just a second, then we're going to go over to CT. If any of you you do have a question, could you type it down for me or let me know that you do have a question so that we can fit you in and not just jump in? I would appreciate that. So, Vanessa, it's going to be you next, and then after that, TD, we're going to get you one of your questions. But Vanessa, for now, it's yours.
Okay, great. Thank you, Keith. Um, so, I didn't think I had any questions, but I love being a part of this forum. But then as I was sitting here waiting, a few different questions popped in my mind. So I'll ask those throughout. The first thing I wanted to ask you, though, Tom, was um, you give back so much to us. We're always asking, kind of like taking advice from you. So what can we do to give back to you? What can we do to help your mission, which is lower the overall entropy of the system, right? What can we do? And I've heard you say, I know, like grow up, be the change, but is there anything else that we can do?
Well, yes, of course, grow up, be the change. That's number one thing that you can do because that helps yourself and it helps everybody else. It makes you more capable of helping everybody else if you grow up. You can be more helpful to more people if you grow up. But what else could you do? Well, if you have talents and skills that you might want to volunteer, because MBT is pretty much a volunteer organization. If you have skills that you want to volunteer, then get in touch with Keith or with Donna at MBT Events, because they are the managers, the orchestrators of everything that goes on. And they have a list of people who volunteer with certain skills. You know, if you're a programmer, or if you do, you know, you make videos, or you, you know, whatever, fix computers. You understand how websites work, and you could help, you know, fix and improve websites. Whatever your skill is, you're an organizer. You have, you know, a meetup group like you do, Vanessa. Whatever it is that you're doing, if you want to know if those skills can be of help to us in general as we plan and organize and go around the country or around the world to try to talk to people, then if you tell Keith and Donna at MBT Events, they'll keep track of that. If you send it to me, I'll look at it and I'll be very appreciative of the effort. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, I won't even remember that you ever sent it to me. So you send it to, because I get so much email, I get so many things, it's hard to keep track of all of it. But if you send it to Don and Keith, they're the organizers. They'll actually organize it. They'll put it in a file. You know, they'll list it by, you know, skills. They'll do all that stuff that organizers do, and they'll be able to come pull that out if they need something. So that's one thing you could do is kind of volunteer to do things. Particularly if we're having an event in an area, we're looking for volunteers in that area that can help us find venues and, you know, do things. So even if you don't have particular skills and you just want to help, just get on Don and Keith's list so that we can call you up or email you if we have something that you can help us with. So that would be one thing. Another thing is MBT is going to spread throughout, well, as far as it spreads throughout the world, I would hope, but it's going to spread by, you know, person to person. We call that viral. You know, people will tell other people. So in as much as you share with people who are interested, then that's helpful. Of course, that's very difficult for many of you to do because, you know, most of your friends, neighbors, and relatives aren't interested. And there's no point trying to share to people who are not interested. Now you just make a nuisance of yourself, and pretty soon people will avoid you. So I wouldn't suggest that you go out and proselytize. That's not the point. But where you are in a forum or an environment or a place where it's appropriate to talk about big picture ideas and concepts and how the world works, then please do. You know, please talk about it and help share the ideas. That will help this thing become more and more viral. If you would want me to show up in your neighborhood or your area to give a talk or do something, then get in touch with Keith and Donna, and they'll tell you what the schedule is and whether or not that can be arranged or not, and whether that'll happen in 2018 or 2019. And Keith's already planning things for 2020 now on the schedule. So he's he really plans far out. So he's putting things together for 2 years from now. So you could do that. Other than that, I'm not sure. You could always run a group, a discussion group, or some kind of a meetup group. If you find that there are people in your area who are also interested and also have a hard time finding people to discuss this with, because this isn't a majority concern. Most people aren't interested in the nature of reality and, you know, our purpose here. That's big picture thinking, and most people are kind of stuck in the little picture. So people who do have big picture thinking sometimes find it tough to find other people to talk to and to relate to and to be friends with. So you might want to start some kind of a meetup group in your area, or maybe it's not just your area. Maybe it's maybe it's all email over the web or Skype or Zoom or something like that. But those sorts of things individuals can do to kind of help move these ideas into the larger population, which is what we'd like to do. Some of the things I'm going to do in the near future to do that is I'm going to try to come out with some a shortened, simpler version of MBT. Of course, it won't have much depth to it because when it's shorter and simpler, it doesn't go as deep. But it will be one that most everybody can read and hopefully find interesting, and will reach a larger audience than the books that I have now. So that's one thing I'm going to do. We're going to try to make some videos that are short and more accessible to the average person, and that's another kind of process we're going to try to work on in the future. So these are the things that are going on, and if you can help in any of these things, if you're a videographer or if you know how to make movies, influence people, say things cleverly or whatever, then go talk to Don and Keith, and they'll put you in harness. They can find a place for you. And sometimes it's just things like we'd like to go through the audiobooks again and find any of the errors, places where a word is repeated or a sentence is repeated, where the editing didn't work well. There's flaws in the editing in that, and we need people just to take a piece of it. Here's a chapter. Just listen to that chapter and write down every mistake that's in that chapter that you hear by time, and then Keith can go back and re-edit it. So that's the kind of thing that just takes a lot of people. If one person does it, it's a huge task. It's hard to do. But if 50 people were to do it, you could do it in 3 days. It would be simple. Each one could just do a chapter or maybe a chapter and a half, and that would make it simple. So there's those kinds of things that would be very helpful. So talk to Donna and Keith and get on their list, and that's probably the biggest thing you can do to help out. But you're already helping out a lot, Vanessa. You have your meetup group there in Vancouver, and you're introducing this MBT to a lot of people that way. Plus, you're helping everybody learn by getting together and discussing and helping each other figure things out, and that's good. So if we had hundreds of those groups, that would be even better.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. Appreciate that.
Tom, it's well, for start, I'm glad that you couldn't see my face during some of that when I felt really embarrassed about going into 2020 and the other things. We do always appreciate any and all offers of help. Over the last couple of years, we've been trying to do a project for putting people in touch. So if you are watching this at home, first of all, get on our mailing list, because that will give you all the news. We're going to make some announcements soon. They're going to be coming on the mailing list. So email us, Keith at MBT Events, to get on our mailing list. And also, if you want to be put in touch with people in your area, we've been working on that project. So if you're in or near to a big city in the world, I mean, they're scattered all over. So we can try and put you in touch with people who are MBT fans, MBT readers, for you to share ideas, and then maybe come up with ideas of your own on how to promote it. Tell people about the videos and things like that. So it's great. It's all going in the right direction, and we do appreciate all the offers and all the help that people give us. Okay, Tiddy, I know you've got 3 or 4 questions. So Tiddy, would you like to ask one of yours next?
Sure. It's a little bit fun because I had exactly the same question as Vanessa, but I have one more aspect of that question. Is it so that we who listen to this, maybe we can all join a common intention on how we would like to see MBT spread over the world?
Have are you thinking of maybe a sort of almost a group meditation, having an intention that we focus on raising the probability that MBT will spread? Is that what you're thinking about?
Yes, yeah, exactly. I'm thinking about raising the possibility by our intentions.
Yeah, well, of course, we can all do that individually. To all do that together, I'll have to think about that. That would be an organizational thing to get that all organized at a particular time. We would do that. There is another. I guess there's 2 other things I might say. Is that in the near future, we are going to try to raise some money so that we can get these experiments done. So we can either give prize money for a university to do them, or we can actually hire some scientists to work on them. You know, money is quite a good inducer of interest. If you have money, then you can create interest with that. So we will probably go to Kickstart and try to raise money just with donations to support that sort of thing. And I don't know exactly when that'll happen because we're not ready yet. We have to make some videos. We have to do, some media research. We have to do a lot of things to get ready for that. But when we do, there is going to be this Kickstart program, or what do we call it? Kickstart. There's a name for it, but anyway, it's going to be it's a crowdfunding, but that's not the word I was looking for. Campaign. That's the word I was looking for. The Kickstart campaign. When that starts, if you are aware of it, and hopefully you'll be aware of it, I'll probably try to, I don't know how we get the word out. Maybe Keith, if you're on the mailing list, will send something out to let everybody know when that starts. But if you could help raise a little excitement within the people you know or whatever about that, that would help a lot. So if that happens, we can get these experiments funded and done. That would be interesting, and I'm looking forward to that. And also, if we have more money than that, we can start making videos that have a lot of animation in them that help younger people, kids and adults that have no background in this or even not much interest in it. But if you use animation, you can get a lot of ideas across that would be hard to get across just verbally. So we'd like to make some videos that are highly animated and descriptive of MBT concepts. So it's not all intellectual. You kind of get the sense of it through the video, and that all costs money because making videos is an expensive thing to do. There's the filming and the editing, and all of that is very time consuming. Therefore, it takes a lot of money to do that. So we will have a Kickstart going. And I guess one other thing on the same subject is that MBT is entirely a volunteer organization, and maybe it will not be that way exclusively if we do the Kickstart, because then we'll actually have some resources to pay people, to do things. But it's always been a volunteer organization, and I've kept it that way on purpose, but also by necessity. I don't have the resources to throw into it like that. My wife and I are both retired now, so we live on retirement income, and it's a volunteer by need, but also I like it that way because if the time is right, if MBT concepts resonate with people, resonate with the general public, then it'll move forward all by itself. It'll do that virally, word to word. People will get excited about it. It will grow. If the time's not right, then there really isn't any point pushing on it. Then if the time is not right, it'd be like pushing on a string. Nothing really happens when you push on a string. The string just bends. So it has to be the right time. I have to be at the right place at the right time. And I'm thinking that this is the right time, that there is enough people out there that really hungry for something other than this greed, fear, self-centeredness that we see and that we live with in the world today. There's a lot of people who want something else that's better than this, that works better. So I think it is the time. And that means that you shouldn't have to throw a lot of money at it to make it go. It ought to catch on. It ought to be something that resonates with people and moves. So by requiring it to be a volunteer organization, I'm basically testing to see, is this the time? Are we ready? If we're not ready now, then maybe 2 or 3 decades from now, it'll be ready and it might catch on then. So there's no point pushing something if its time has not yet come. If it's not ripe to push, it just don't work. No matter how hard you push, it isn't going to work well. So it has to attract volunteers. It has to make people say, like Titi and Vanessa just said, how can we help? What can we do? You see, if you have enough people saying that, then it's going to spread. It's going to be successful. So that's sort of a measure of its success, that people just pop up out of nowhere and volunteer. That's a very important aspect of it. If that doesn't happen, then the time's not ready yet. It's not ripe, and the culture isn't ready to accept it. In which case, it'll just have to wait till later, till they are ready, because you can't push anything before it's time, before it's ready. So that's kind of the idea. That's why we've always been a volunteer organization. One, we don't have any money anyway, but two, it has to necessarily be that way. Otherwise, it isn't going to work if it doesn't actually pull people in and make them who want to volunteer, who want to be a part of this, and then it's going to go, all by itself. You have to get that. You have to get that kind of enthusiasm for it before it's that it's really time to happen now. So I appreciate all this volunteering. Yes, that's great. That's exactly what I want to hear. That's the sort of thing that tells me that it is time. People are responding to it well. And the more you share with other people or form up groups so you can have people discuss it with, so you're not all alone with your thoughts, then the more likely it's going to grow and take off, and the higher the probability that we can turn this world into a kinder, gentler, better place. And that's the end goal.
Yeah.
Tom, we've been working with you now for 10 years, and just in the last year, there has really been a sharp rise in the number of emails and the requests and the interest in both yourself and your work. So it's definitely getting there very, very quickly. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill. So it's good to see where it's going. Okay, the next question is from Nicholas. Nicholas, are you ready to ask your question?
I had some questions about some health challenges. I had an experience or an incident at work where I lost my sight for almost 40 minutes. And I was visiting the hospital, and the doctors didn't find anything suspicious. And it has happened 3 times now. And my question is just, could this be some kind of nudges, or is this too hard to answer?
When you have these things that the doctors look at it, they do all their tests, check your blood pressure, check your sugar levels, check glaucoma and all the other things that they know how to check, and they come up empty. I have no idea why that happened to you. That means that it's probably something that is being pushed by non-physical. Okay, that could be a nudge, or it could be levels of stress. You could have very high stress levels, very high anxiety levels that you deal with from day to day, and that may just be a way that you express those things. Sometimes, if when you're dealing with high levels of stress, your body will just shut down for a while. Of course, something like going blind for 40 minutes just adds to the stress. Now you have all the stress you had before, plus the stress of there's something physically wrong with me and I don't know what it is. But that's the way the body works. So it could be that sort of thing. And just like when we were talking about the horrible events predicted for the future, stay skeptical. Just stay skeptical. It might be a non-physical cause. In other words, a cause really through consciousness, through stress. It could be something that's just the doctors don't know anything about and they haven't figured out yet, but that's unlikely. At this point, our medicine has seen enough people do enough strange things that if enough people do it, they start to follow that and study it whatever. So if they don't have a clue, it's pretty good chance that it's not primarily a physical issue. It's a consciousness issue. And it could be a wake-up call just to break you out of your rut that you're in of everyday things that you're doing, telling you to slow down, relax, smell the roses, and think big thoughts. It could be that. It's hard to say. You know, there's a lot of things that it could be. I'd ask you a question. Do you just go totally blind, or do you just your vision gets poor?
It's in between, because I can see, if I look at the PC or the laptop, it's almost like half of the laptop is gone. So it's both.
It's enough that that it's hard to miss, right? But not so much that you're not processing any light at all.
Exactly.
Yeah. I suspect that's not a physical issue. My guess is it's a non-physical issue, which, like I say, it could be anxiety or stress or overload, or it could just be a wake-up call to start looking into bigger pictures and non-physical things, and kind of expanding your viewpoint and getting out of your everyday rut, changing the way you look at things, which of course that happening does change the way you look at things. So it might just be that, probably is something like that going on.
Thank you.
Yeah. But stress can manifest in all kinds of physical things. Stress and anxiety, fear can manifest in lots of physical ways. People get itches, people hear voices, people feel like their hair is standing up on end, people get electric shocks, people get back pains, people get shoulder freezes up that they can't use it anymore. The list goes on and on and on of ways that anxiety and stress can manifest physically. And in all of those cases, the doctors look at it, they do all their tests, and they shake their heads and say, we have no idea what's going on here. And that's kind of a good sign that what you're experiencing is not really a physical problem, but more of a spiritual problem, or a stress and anxiety problem.
Tom, one thing I'd like to address on Nicholas's question there that he didn't mention was that he is getting migraines, and he has also been listening to the binaural beats, and he was asking if that could at all contribute to the headaches he's getting in any way.
Yeah.
Could the binaural beats contribute to it? Possibly. It's not likely, but it's not impossible. It would depend on how you process those beats. If you say had a fear, and this may not be in your intellect, this may be a fear that you wouldn't know you have. If you had a fear of getting into altered states and then not being in control, a lot of times people have a control-based fear. If they get into an altered state, or if they go out of body, or if any of these things happen to them, they're out of control. They're no longer controlling things the way they normally do, and that creates a fear. If a person had those kinds of fears about losing control, or about something awful might happen if they didn't have control, or if they were no longer in this reality frame, then that fear can take that binaural beat and turn it into a headache, which basically stops the process. It's something that keeps you from getting into that deep meditation state, going out of body, or letting go of your intellectual control over your thoughts and your mind. So in that way, it could cause headaches, or certain frequencies might cause headaches. I would say that if it's the headache is caused by some of the 512 or higher frequencies, then move down to the lower ones. Do the 6432. Go into the lower frequency. Those should be less intensive and less likely to cause a headache. That would be they're gentler and softer kind of tones, aren't quite so invasive or pushy. So that would be one thing to try. Other than that, just try to relax completely. try to think about whether or not you have any anxiety about having your intellect lose control. People that live out of their heads really fear if their head isn't any longer engaged and in control. That's a scary place for them to be. And that sometimes can cause so much tension that the headache occurs.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. I will smell the roses.
Good, nice one. That's what you should do, Nicholas. Well done. Okay, Tom. Before I go back to Vanessa, I've just noticed here that we have a question from Ash. Now, if I remember rightly, Ash was also in the Youth Fireside Chats, and it goes back to the thing about helping out with MBT. He said, "Tom, what would I need to do to be able to do what you do? Teach about love. Would you be up for creating a sort of credential that you could bestow on others once they have demonstrated sufficient knowledge and ability to do what you do? That way you could be in multiple places at once." We could do with that. I will listen to whomever because I recognize that we are one. However, many places of knowledge still require some sort of credibility to even give you a chance to speak. Would that actually help the LCS to grow up?
Well, I'm not sure. There is this problem with credentials. Credentials need to be objective. You have to have an objective set of things that you know. You know, you're given a test and you have to pass the test. That's how you get credentialed when you get an advanced degree. You know, if you get a master's degree or a PhD, you basically have to show that you know and have competency to a certain level in a certain area. Well, all of that is about applied knowledge. Growing up isn't about what you know. It's not even about, what you apply. It's about what you are, who you are. It's a being thing. And it's really hard to credential or accredit somebody on their quality of being. There are any number of people who consider themselves to be highly evolved, very spiritual people, and who know how to talk the talk, know how to give right answers to the questions, know that it's all about love and can talk about love, peace, and growing up and so on. And they're really, at their own being level, they're really still not very grown up because this is all intellectual. It's all in their mind. It's the way they think about the world. They understand it, but understanding it and being it are two different things. One is an intellectual quality, the other is more of an intuitive, being level, emotional quality. You have to be it. And I don't know of any way to certify being. You see, it's a very difficult thing to certify. And if you had somebody who could talk the talk but couldn't walk the walk, then would they really be a great help? Probably not. On the long run, that probably isn't going to be a big advantage. So how do we find people who really are grown up and certify them at the level of their being? Well, that's a difficult thing to do. And I'm not sure that it can be done in mass. In other words, that we'd have dozens and dozens and dozens of such people who could go around and be these enlightened, I shouldn't say enlightened, that would be able to help others grow up. So I don't know how to organize, train, and create that, because organizing and training are all about intellectual knowledge, and that's not really what it's about. And when you get to the point where now you've trained the priesthood, right, who are going out and they have the authority that God speaks through them, well, that just creates another whole can of worms, another big problem that you have, particularly if that priesthood also is walking around with its own ego and its own fears and things. So I kind of shy away from that sort of organization, though I do see your point. It would be nice to have that, but I think what we do is we just wait for that to naturally develop. And leaders tend to develop on their own. They grow up, and because they're grown up, people notice that, and people tend to have confidence in them and feel that they really are connecting with them at a being level. And so that takes place naturally without them having to be ordained or blessed or given credentials in an official system. Just the sense of an official system with accreditation and all that stuff kind of makes me nervous, and I kind of shy away from that immediately. It sounds too organized, too structured, too bureaucratic, too I don't know, just too much. That lies on a very slippery slope. That can be the beginning of deterioration of the quality of the ideas. So I think I'd rather just let that spring up naturally among the people who do grow up, because those who do grow up will naturally find themselves helping other people. So if that just happens on its own, then they really don't need to be certified. I know that's not really a satisfactory answer, because people want an organization that gives them a prescription and tells them how to do it. But that's really not what we're about. It's not how to do it. It's how to be it. And nobody can give you a prescription for how to be. You have to do that on your own. So,
Tom, following up from that, if someone puts themselves out there as an expert in MBT, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Or is that just their own interpretation of your work and your theory?
that's just their own interpretation of where they think they are. They call themselves an expert. Well, like everything else, be skeptical. I tell people, be skeptical of everything. Be skeptical of me. Be skeptical of everything you hear. If it's real, if really they do walk the walk, they are grown-up people, they do love, they do care, that'll be obvious. That'll come right through. If they don't, then they can claim to be an expert of anything. We literally have thousands and thousands of people who call themselves experts that really don't know a whole lot about what they think they're experts at. People tend to get carried away with their own egos about how fantastic their abilities are, and they claim expertise that maybe they really don't have. That's a kind of a normal thing in a society that is very ego and fear based. So there's lots of people claiming to be experts, but an expert isn't the point. They need to be quality being. It's not about their knowledge, it's about their quality of being that's important. You can read MBT and all the other wise books in the world and memorize every word on every page and still not grow up much. If you don't change and reduce your entropy and become love, then yes, you can talk the talk, and you can debate, and you can tell everybody else what their problem is and how they should fix it, but that's not really helpful in the long run.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tom. Okay, we're going to go back to Vanessa. She has a question on entropy. She's having problems with her camera, so she's just going to be audio. But Vanessa, if you're there, go away. Shoot.
Okay, thank you, Keith. And thank you, Tom, for that answer. I really like that, because I've been looking at, obviously, like teaching MBT. We have book clubs and practical application, and knowing that there's no real structure to follow, but it's all about really just connecting with people and creating a safe space for them to be authentic and be real and let go of their fears. I think that's been kind of the foundation of what we've been trying to practice. So it's very reassuring to hear you kind of echo that as well.
Yes, the problem with structure, Vanessa, is that once you have a structure and once you have a hierarchy, you also create a power structure. Any structure, any structure in a social organization becomes a hierarchy, and then that power follows the hierarchy. So the people on top get to tell the people below, what they should think and believe and how they should act, and that's just not productive to growing up. So I'd rather it be a very flat, if there's leadership, yes, but the leadership shouldn't be telling other people what to think and how to be. It ought to be providing a good example of what to
Right.
be, you see, and let everybody else figure it out and grow up on their own, because that's the only way to grow up. You have to grow up on your own. Nobody can grow you up. All you can do is be a good example and give people a space that is safe and caring so that they can take the chances and build up the courage to grow themselves up. So, yes, a very flat organization that has very little hierarchy in it is the way I, think that this has to go. So I'm very shy of organizing at that level. That's
Right.
what happened pretty much to most of the world's religions. They organized and they structured and they have their hierarchy and their priesthood. And when you do all that, the basic ideas that are about individual quality start to disappear, and the ego starts to fill up that structure. Power fills up that structure, and the need for resources to support that structure, and pretty soon you end up with an organization is about perpetuating itself rather than helping people grow up.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I definitely share in that that vision. Um, any of the people that volunteer with our organization, they share their voice, and we call them facilitators because all they're doing is facilitating a safe space for people to come and show up and be real and do that important internal work. So there's no dogma or telling people what they need to do, because people need to decide what they need to do on their own, right? So
Right.
yeah, I really like that a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, you grow up by making choices and then learning from the feedback from those choices. That's how you grow up. You don't grow up because somebody lectures you and tells you how you ought to be.
Yeah, exactly. And when we can create that safe environment for people to make those mistakes, fall down, but then also be encouraged to get back up and try a different path, then it supports them in trying new things and learning new things their own way. So it's really helpful. But the question that I had around entropy was reading your book last night, and my understanding was that entropy. I see that the way that it works in this kind of physical matter reality is that entropy naturally tends to increase, and then you said that, but with as far as consciousness goes, naturally tends to entropy naturally decreases. I didn't realize that though, because I thought that we had to apply effort and direct our intent in order to lower our entropy. I didn't understand that it naturally would just decrease. Can you speak on that?
Yes, it doesn't. You are right. And if I said it the other way, or I said something that sounded like it was the other way, then I would be wrong. So you have it correct. You have to put effort in to decrease your entropy. It takes work. It doesn't just consciousness doesn't decrease its entropy just by hanging out. It takes effort to do that. You need to try, make choices, look at the results of those choices, and from those results see how can you do better, and then change yourself, and then do better and be better. That's how you lower the entropy. So it doesn't just happen automatically. In consciousness and in the outside, in this physical virtual reality that we live in both of those, if you do nothing and put forth no effort, if no work goes in, no energy is put into it, then entropy increases naturally by itself everywhere in consciousness and in the outside world. Now, the way that consciousness evolves, and I may have said something like this, or I may have intended to say something like this, the evolution of consciousness has to do with becoming lower and lower entropy, right? That's how we evolve ourselves. And that is where we're going. That's the natural path for consciousness to take, is to evolve, to grow up. It would be, the opposite path, de-evolving and growing down, if you will, the opposite of growing up. If you de-evolve, that means you become more fearful, more ego, more self-centered, And eventually, because those things are unstable and self-destruct, the whole system goes away and self-destructs. So I might have said something, or I may have had in my mind the idea that, the way consciousness is going to exist and grow and move on and evolve is by lowering entropy. And that's kind of the natural path for consciousness to move in. And it may have sounded, that I said the other thing, or maybe I said the other thing and should have said that. But in any case, you are right. Both places, consciousness and in the physical world, no energy input, and we have de-evolution in consciousness, and it's actually de-evolution here as well.
Right.
Our physical evolution also lowers entropy. So as we act, with fear and with self-centeredness, those are forces toward de-evolution in our physical reality.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it works the same in both the NPMR and NPMR.
Yes.
I think I just read it wrong, so I'm looking at it again. I was half asleep when I read it, but you said consciousness naturally evolves to lower entropy states. So yeah, so it naturally evolves to lower entropy states. Not that,
Right.
yeah. Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, Tiddy, you asked, you submitted 2 or 3 really good questions, so I'm going to turn it over to you. Why don't you ask a couple of those for us?
Oh, sure. I will be happy. Well, this question has 2 views, one more general and one more specific. And it's about how to respond to people's fearful behaviors in a caring way. I'm thinking about the victims, the loud egos, the angry people. Sometimes I think it's hard to know how to make productive choices when encountering people's fearful behaviors. So step 1 is, of course, to work on your own fears. Don't get mad. So consider you don't feel annoyed. How can we respond when we run into these behaviors? That's the general question.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Of course, every individual and every behavior is unique. So we can't say one thing that kind of works for everybody. You have to judge, you have to understand each situation individually. But there are a few general things we can say, and that is if you run into somebody who's just angry, chances are anything you say is going to feed the anger, because when people are angry, they will use anything you might say to them will push that anger further, because they just want to be angry. They feel angry. They want to, lash out. They want to do these sorts of things. And even if you say something very nice and loving to them or give them a hug, they may push you away. They may, react with anger. In that case, there's not much you can do. You have to just let that be. The best interaction there would be to walk away or to just sit down and be with them quietly and not say anything. Just let them rant and rage for a while until they kind of pass that point. And then after they calm down some and kind of get over it, then you could maybe talk to them. But the wrong thing to do, it's easier to come up with wrong things to do than right things to do, because there's always more wrong things that you can do than right things. The wrong thing to do would be try to convince them that they shouldn't be angry. There's no reason to be angry. Look, this is probably okay, and they really didn't mean that. And the more you try to reason with somebody who is not being reasonable, the worse it's going to go. So trying to solve the problem with logic won't work, because it's not a logical problem. They're not angry because that anger is logical. They're angry, that anger is irrational. So rationality isn't going to help. You might as well just sit and wait till they get over it. And that may be the next day. You may walk away from it and come back and talk to them the next day and approach them very positively. Understand where their buttons are. Their buttons will be attached to their ego and their fear. So if you understand their ego and their fear, you'll understand where their buttons are and try to avoid those buttons, Because when you push one of those buttons, then suddenly they go into irrational space where you no longer can deal with them as rational people. And avoiding that is one of the best things you can do, not put them in that space. And some people, the best strategy is to just see as little of them as possible. Just not interact with them because they're so very negative, so very self-centered that interaction with them is just problematical. Now, if that person happens to be somebody you need to interact with, now that's different. You see, if it's somebody that's easy to walk away from, well, just walk away and stay away. You know, like maybe a coworker that you really don't get along with, but you don't work in the same area anyway, so you just are polite. You know, how are you? Fine, how are you? In the hallway, but you don't really spend time with that person because they're too irrational, too much anger, too much ego and fear. Now, if it's somebody like your spouse or, you know, your child or, you know, an aunt or an uncle or somebody you have to spend time with, then the thing to do is avoid their buttons, find a place where they don't get on, you know, negative, find just something that they like or that's positive in their life or something that they look at in a positive way and go meet them there. Spend time on that positive thing. Whatever it is, whether it's their hobby or whether it's people they do like or their favorite movie, whatever, spend some time there on that subject with them, and also spend some quiet time with them where you're just hanging out with them and you ask and you interact with them in a personal way, not an intellectual way. If they, if you're sitting with them and they look like, or you might just ask them, would you like something to eat? Would you like something to drink? Can I get you a blanket? Are you chilly? Just, take care of them. Be nice to them. Show them that you care about them. Not telling them that, but just show them. You see that you care in little ways. At first, they will think, oh, I wonder what she wants. They're being nice to me. I wonder what they want. They're being nice to me like that. But you don't want anything. You just be nice a little bit and then let that go. You don't have to do anything more. But if that's consistent, that will break through eventually. And they will feel that and they will love it. They will like it. They will relish that somebody really cares about them. Then they will be a little more careful with their buttons. They won't let you hit their buttons quite, they won't react so violently. If you get in and around subject matter where their buttons are, they will remain rational longer. So you can actually turn them into a friend or somebody you can talk to. So the way to approach it is to find ways that you can be kind to them, that you can be helpful. And that may be hard in the beginning. Some people, it's just really even hard to be nice to them because even if you smile at them and say, have a nice day, they growl back at you. Sometimes people are like that. But just keep being nice and subtle and maybe even distant ways until it builds up. And over months, over a year, you can build up a positive relationship with them, okay, avoiding their buttons. And that's how you can kind of get inside, if you like. And at that point, what you'll find inside is a very terrified, frightened, unhappy person. That's what's in there. And it's almost like a very frightened, unhappy, terrified child. That's what's in there. And you have to work with it just like they were a child. You have to be comforting, but not pushy. You can't push them this way or that. You can't tell them how they be. You can't criticize them. You just have to be nice. And eventually you will be able to be more help to them. And they will change and they'll start to grow up just because of that. And pretty soon they may even come to, depend on you because you're the only friend they have. You see, so it just takes time to work yourself up into a very bad relationship with people who are hard to get to know. And sometimes it just won't work. There's some people you just have to say, you're on your own. Good luck. I wish you well, but I just don't see that it's an advantage for either one of us to spend any time together, because it just doesn't work out. And if that's the case, then keep your distance. Whenever you're around that person, be polite, be nice, smile, don't push any of their buttons, but just don't go out of your way to get involved. So it depends on the individuals. Some you can get close to, some you can make friends out of, some you can't. And when you can't, and that's somebody you love, then that's sad. That's very sad, but it just is how it is. We're all on our own path, struggling with our own issues in our own way, and everybody has to find their own way, out of their fears. You can't necessarily fix everyone or even anyone. So you just give them the space and the comfort and the security that they can fix themselves. And if you can't do that, then you're just probably, it's just something you're not going to change. They're just not ready yet. They're not ready to change. They're too invested in their ego, too invested in their fear. They're not ready to change. And they'll just have to stew in their own, in their own juice until they are ready. And though it's sad, very sad, when you see people like that, you just can see them hurting themselves and you want to do something to help them break out of it, but they have to break out of it in their own time. And like I say, all you can do is make them feel safe enough that they can start to grow and expand into different space. But it doesn't always work with everybody. Some people aren't ready. And if you can't push people who aren't ready. And if that happens to be a child or a spouse, well, that's a difficult problem. If it's a coworker, that's easy. If it's their boss, it's somewhere in between. Does that help any, TT?
Yeah, it helps a lot. And you also answered the next question that was about a specific teenager, the angry wall up. So I think I understand a bit more on how to handle him in a more productive way.
Yeah.
So,
Teenagers are a special case because they are trying to become adults. They're trying not to be children. To do that, they have to make their own choices. They have to make their own mistakes. And they resent people trying to nudge them into making choices. Oh, you need to do it this way. Oh, that's a bad path to go down. Don't do that. Because here they are struggling to make their own decisions. So with them, you have to be very careful not to tell them what to do, but rather to just show them the possibilities. Here are, 10 possibilities. You could go down this route, and here are the things that are likely to happen. And you could go down this route, and here are the things that are likely to happen, and so on. But you make your own choice. You judge it in your own way. And you see that way, if they go down a negative route, they will already have what you've told them about what's likely to happen down that route. And as they start to see that happen, it'll ring a bell. Oh, mom has already told me about that sort of thing might happen. And they're liable to notice it quicker because you told them. But if you say, don't go down that route, that's not a good route. Well, now they almost have to go down that route. You see, you've made it so they have no choice now. They have to do that because you told them not to. And by doing what you say, they're just following directions and not making their own choices. So with teenagers, you have to let them choose. They're old enough now to choose and to deal with the consequences, but inform them of what consequences might be, but not in any way of I told you so, or not in any way of if you do this, that'll happen. Just here's some of the possibilities and give them good possibilities as well as bad possibilities. And also tell them that all these possibilities are just things out of your own experience and out of the experience that you know of others. They're not necessarily what's going to happen to them, because they're a unique person that's going to make unique choices. But there's been lots of people I know of went down that route, and here's the kind of stuff that happened to them. You may be different, but just wanted to let you know in case the information's useful. So that sort of thing, as opposed to trying to give them direction and tell them what to do because we know what is going to hurt them. We can't stand to let them go hurt themselves. So we have this idea we have to tell them what to do and what not to do. Well, let them make the choice. And if they crash and burn, then be the first one to give them a hug. Do not tell them I told you so, and pat them on the butt and send them back out into the world to try again. You know, so that's basically your role at that point when they're teenagers, is to give them guidance, not direction. When they're littler, you give them direction, not guidance, because they really can't deal with guidance then. They just need to be told, no, you cannot play in the street. But when they're teenagers, you have to let them make their own mistakes, but give them the information so that they'll be aware of those mistakes more quickly. Don't be judgmental. Never be judgmental with them. If they make a mistake and they come home with egg all over their face because what you told them might happen happened, don't mention it. They get it. You don't have to explain it to them again.
Thank you very much. I understand it in theory, so let's see if I can practice it.
Yeah. Well, all these things that I tell people are all easy to say, hard to do. It takes practice.